Hello again. My name is Bev Lewis, and if you have children and you're going through a separation, this is a video that you would definitely want to watch. My name is Bev Lewis, and I'm the president and founder of Positive Solutions Divorce Services, where we help couples that are going through separation and divorce save unnecessary legal fees and guide them step by step through the process. Today I have a special guest, Kavita Bhagat. Kavita is a family law lawyer, and we're going to talk today about child support. What child support is, who it's for, what the purposes is, and some of the special and extraordinary expenses that come around child support. So welcome, Kavita.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I am a certified family law specialist, and I'm also an accredited mediator and an arbitrator. I also serve in my capacity as a parenting coordinator, and I work with the Office of the Children's Lawyer, and I'm in my capacity as a panel lawyer with them. In terms of my clientele, I have clients from possibly every ethnic background. I represent clients from every walk of life, every income bracket as well. And of course, I do represent children since I am a panel lawyer with the Office of the Children's Lawyer.
That's wonderful. That's a big role that you play. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit then about child support. What is child support? There's lots of different ideas about, okay, child support, I'm going to give you the child support, but it needs to go into my child's bank account.
Mm-hmm.
So let's have the discussion around what truly child support is.
Child support is payable by one person to the other when the children are in the primary caregiver of a particular person, which could be the primary caregiver. The primary caregiver does not necessarily have to be a parent. It could be a grandparent. It could even be a foster parent that the child is being provided care by. So really it is money that's given such that the primary caregiver of the child can actually provide care or basic necessities for the child, such as putting a roof over their head, or buying groceries, or buying day-to-day necessities for the child. But it's just that. It's not that it has to be paid to the child. It is very, very rarely that the court would be okay with the child support being paid directly to the child. In fact, I would even go to the extent of saying that it's probably less than 1% of the time that it actually happens that it's paid directly to the child.
So it's for the day-to-day care of the child. So heat and hydro,
Mm-hmm.
food in their mouths,
Mm-hmm.
clothes on their back,
Yeah.
driving the child from one activity to the other, so gas expenses and
That's
those
right.
kinds of things.
Yeah.
So what does child support not cover?
So child support does not cover special expenses. So special expenses could constitute expenses such as if the child is in rep hockey, rep basketball, league hockey, league basketball, or swimming, or tutoring, or daycare expenses, etc. But there is a catch to that as well. If the income bracket is, say, suppose 60,000, and every household on the street, the children are attending community swimming lessons, then the expectation is that the recipient is not going to be entitled for special expenses for swimming because it is not extraordinary. However, if this child is going for advanced swimming lessons, then special expenses would be payable. Child support is supposed to cover that minimal expense associated with it, but it really depends on the income bracket. If the income bracket is lower, say 30,000, then of course now this particular expense also becomes a special expense. So it all depends on the income of the parties, really.
Right. And so I have a lot of clients that I see that through mediation, they want more special expenses added to the list of expenses that are going to be paid by the other party.
Mm-hmm.
And they, for the most part, they're agreeing because they're
Mm-hmm.
in mediation.
Mm-hmm.
So those expenses could be, we're going to take the kids on holiday. I'm going to take, as the mother, I'm going to take the kids on holidays, and I want my ex to pay a portion of that expense.
Mm-hmm.
Some people agree to that, some people don't agree to that. Is that a type of expense that would be considered as a special expense in the eyes of the courts?
So the statute and the law would not consider that as a special expense. However, yes, there are parties through the mediation process who definitely do agree to such expenses. What I would consider as a special expense in that for certain income brackets is perhaps applying for a visa or applying for the passport itself. That could be considered a special expense, but not the cost of the travel alone. And also, if you look at it, if there are, say, complete dance lessons or competitions that the kids have to attend, or if the child is doing hockey and now we have hockey competitions in the United States, so they have to go to Belgium or certain places, then yes, that would constitute a special expense. And more schools are offering travel and trips abroad. That would constitute a special expense. But just trips, if the parties are traveling, that's their vacation expense, that should not be borne, it cannot be considered as a special expense, no.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So how does child support get calculated?
So child support is determined by the federal child support guidelines. It's fairly simple. You look at the federal child support guidelines, you simply figure out what your income is, how many number of kids that you have, and then you can decide the quantum of child support that's payable. There is no ifs, buts, there are no variations. It's just a simple chart, you follow it. It's changing. For example, now child support has been, cost of living index has to be adjusted. So it goes up every year, and sometimes it goes up $20, $100, it depends, but you simply follow the chart basically.
And is that calculated on gross or net income?
It's always calculated on the gross income, not on the net income.
On the gross
But the gross income can be different. So for example, if you're self-employed, the way child support is calculated is of course completely different, because the line 150 income is never ever indicative of your actual income, because it's self-employed people or people who run a business or a partnership or otherwise, you have the ability to claim a lot of your deductions. So the court considers the line 150 income for people who are in that situation as the base from which you have to build on from there. So you add back the deductions, you add back other expenses that you have written off against the corporation, such as perhaps your gas bill or your cell phone bill or your entertainment expenses, to actually arrive at the number for child support. And the law does provide for this, although a lot of people have a great amount of difficulty understanding this concept. The courts are very, very clear that the line 150 income is but the base when it comes to self-employed business income or partnership and other situations.
Right on.
It really depends on the kind of work that each person is involved in. And as a contractor, the potential to actually increase or impute an income is perhaps a little limited. But if we were talking about somebody who's in the business of building larger homes and selling them or something, and he had an incorporated business and he was still paying himself through the corporation, writing down the expenses, we would calculate it a little differently. I would want to look at his personal income tax returns and his corporate income tax returns. And for example, if the corporation has made, say, I don't know, 400,000 for the year, and he's only paid himself 60,000 and still written off deductions against that, I would want to take a lot of the retained earnings into account for it as well, because one does have the ability to actually not take money out of the retained earnings just for the year that a person is separating and say, oh my God, I didn't make any money, and cry poor. But it doesn't work that way, because realistically, you can use that income. So really what I would want to do is I would want to do a standard of living test as well, which is where the financial statement comes into play. It would set out all the expenses, and I would want to take a look and say, affordability. If you spent about 90,000 and you're declaring an income of 19,000 and you don't have any debt, it does not make any sense.
That's right.
If you took all these vacations and you're still claiming that you don't have the money, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But if worst case scenario, then I would ask for bank statements for the corporation, personal and private as well, any non-arm's length transaction. So in this particular case, if the person had, say, his father or mother as well, and he was just cutting them a check, just income splitting, and wanted to show lower income so he doesn't have to pay support, and the father and mother are really sleeping all day and they're 90 years old, and obviously I would want to add that back to his income as well. Or for example, he was paying his wife a salary, and she's not going to get that income any longer, I would want to add that back to his income as well, for purposes of calculating child support. A lot of times we also come across in today's day and age where the person is actually paying his own children an income, and
Yes.
you know we have to factor that in as well, and see that's not their actual income. So there are a lot of situations where it requires further analysis in arriving at the actual amount for child support purposes. With the sole proprietor, especially when we are talking about, say, construction or landscape or things like that, of course, Uber used to be that way when we had to factor cash income, but it's no longer like that. But in businesses such as this, especially cleaning companies and otherwise as well, or tutoring and things like that, there's a lot of potential for cash income.
Yes.
And the cash income is something that we really honestly have to watch out for, because the wife can come in and say, you know, just last week he got paid $6,000 and it was under the pillow or the mattress. And the reality is it's very, very, very hard for us to keep track of that.
Yes.
But there are people who will never have a Visa bill at a grocery store, but somehow they're eating, you know, they obviously did eat at home all the time as well. So we have to look into historically what was happening with this family. I once had a client where he claimed, you know, he huffed and puffed and said, I have no cash income. And his downfall was that the private school expenses for all three of the children was 100% cash. The school was more than happy to receive a cash payment. I don't know how he did it, perhaps in a dollar store bag, but he would drop off almost 20,000+ in cash at the
Wow.
school to pay
Wow.
for the private school expenses. It was incredible, but we do have to factor it in. And of course, he did have to pay support with the inclusion of that amount as well.
We do see those clients that have $150,000 income for 5 years, and then the year that they go into a separation, all of a sudden they are only claiming, you know, $30,000.
Of course.
They may have quit their job because they don't want to pay child support, and all these other wonderful things that they try to do from getting away from that. So it is important to have that history of what has happened in the past.
Well, during the mediation process, people are usually good at coming to an agreement and saying, fine, I concede. I'm willing to concede that my income is X amount. But during the court process, what one does need to take into factor is that the court does have the authority to impute income.
Yes.
So you can't just simply say, and a lot of times, for example, we see this in perhaps trucking companies, you know, suddenly out of the blue, a truck is being written off. I mean, these trucks are worth 150, 200,000, and suddenly they have absolutely no value and the person cannot drive any longer. Or they will simply say, why don't you just take over my business? I'm willing to sign off my entire interest in the business to my wife. She can just take it if she feels that it's worth X amount of dollars, or she can just go ahead and make the money. And we often try to remind our clients and say, you know, the court does have the ability to impute an income. You can't just walk away from it. You can hum and haw and say, you know what, your income is 20,000. But the reality is that if your standard of living and if there is potential to show that the ins and out of your bank accounts or your credit card expenses were X amount, then the court's more than likely to say that on an average this was your income and there's cause for imputation of income, and go ahead and impute it. And if they do impute it and you are on the hook to pay X amount in child support, you can't just say my line 150 is 19,000 and I'm not going to pay child support, because there are consequences associated with it. Because if tomorrow you haven't paid, there are further consequences. You are going to lose your driver's license. There's a very high potential you're going to lose your passport. There's a very high potential you won't even have a toothbrush when you end up in jail.
Yes.
That's the reality of it.
And I think bottom line, you really need to think about where this money is going. You know, this money is going for your children.
Yeah.
When you were with your spouse, you were together making an income and providing financially and other things for your children, for clothing and for heat and hydro. And because you and your spouse are no longer together, you can't just forget about your kids. You have to pay for your children.
Yeah.
So we don't want deadbeat parents out there. We want to have amicable families. That is what we're trying to do with Positive Solutions. We want to promote amicable families so that the children are not the ones that are in the middle of this, and they're the ones that are suffering.
Yeah.
So child support, it's very important. We could talk for hours on this, and maybe we'll have another segment over top, because there is a lot to talk about child support,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily just end at 18, and that's a whole nother topic on top
Oh,
of itself.
for
So
sure.
maybe we'll have another segment with respect to that.
Sure.
But the basics of child support, very important for your children. Don't take out your frustrations on your kids that you may have for your spouse.
I totally echo your
Yeah.
sentiments there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kavita,
Thanks.
for joining
A
me
pleasure.
today. Like I said, we got lots more to talk about on that subject, so we'll have to do this again. But
For sure.
It's been a pleasure to have you today, and I really appreciate you
Thank
spending
you.
some time with me. Thank you.